I feel for John McMullen. He was in the middle of the Schweimer last night. He got to experience the Schweim in all his Schweim glory.
His ears must still be bleeding.
Billy Schweim from the locker room. We love him. I feel like Schweim was like, he had all these stats and facts like written down on a sheet, and like he had to get all the stats and facts read before the end of the show. So he was just saying anything random, just to read them. Like, John has given up a great point on the defense, and Billy would be like, but Carson Wentz is throwing for 60%. And he's like, everyone's like dead silent. Like, what does that have to do with anything we're saying?
Right.
But it says it right on my sheet here. Like, Schweim had to get out these facts. I love the Schweim. I was like, Billy, you just said something that has nothing to do with this conversation.
Yeah, he's just excited that he has stats in front of him. He feels like the stat guy now.
Well, normally he brings the newspaper to do his show. The show was at night, so there was no newspaper.
Yeah, he probably couldn't see it either at night.
But, John, you handled it well, the Schweimer.
I was joking with Josh. I'll tell you who would go to a bank, Billy Schweim. I love the guy.
Yeah.
I joke that if you put an Eagles fan in a time capsule in 1980 and reanimated him yesterday, it would be Billy Schweim. He hasn't evolved. He does not realize the game has evolved from 1980.
You don't say. Interesting.
But he's a great guy.
A tremendous guy. I say Billy is the foil who hates being the foil.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, it's the classic old school Eagles, run the football. I always ask them, I'd be convinced if they weren't an Eagles fan and they had to play against the Eagles, would they say, run the football or take shots at Jalen Hills and Rasul Douglas and Avonte Maddox and everybody else who gets burned every week? But they'd still be saying, run the football.
Yeah.
Even though Carson Wentz is 11 for 11 with a 140-plus passer rating in the fourth quarter. But run the football.
Do we have any better? By the way, we love Billy. Billy's the man. Saturday, noon to 12, 10 to noon, I should say, and Sunday as well, leading you into Eagles and Cowboys this week. Listen to the locker room. Now, do we have any better indication on who will be available to run the football, i.e. Jordan Howard, on Sunday?
Not today. We'll get a better indication tomorrow. The Eagles actually had off today, the players, which is rare. They're usually in doing a walkthrough on Tuesday. Doug gave them off. So they weren't even at the facility today. And the Eagles have been playing this game for a long time now when it comes not only to Jordan Howard, but also you can throw Nelson Agholor into that mix now, as well as Lane Johnson, and they're going to play that competitive advantage card all week. There's no question about that. But I think and I know no one's going to agree with this, and certainly Schweimer last night and Tony even did not agree. I find myself a weird person to say this, but man, the Eagles need Nelson Agholor on the field, and that's sad. That's sad to say, but they need it just for his athleticism, just for his ability to run routes, just to be out there. Because,
but how do they use him? How do they use him, John? Does he go back to the like? I'm with you. I get it. Agholor is inconsistent. He doesn't catch the ball all the time, but a lot of those come when he's playing out of position. When he plays in position, he makes plays. He catches the ball. He gets up the field. He's got some speed. But the problem is, are you going to bump Greg Ward out of the slot to use Agholor, or do you put Agholor back where he doesn't help you as much?
You do have to put him outside because the one guy you have to leave on the field is Greg Ward, and Greg Ward occasionally plays outside, but he's mainly effective in the slot, and I think Greg has earned his playing time and earned the right to be out there. But, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I joked he played, I think, 71 of 77 offensive snaps against the Redskins. He put up Mac Hollins-level production, 0 for 2, had 2 targets, dropped a touchdown. And I got news for you guys. If there's a different officiating crew, defenses in this league call them pick routes, offenses call them rub routes. Every team in the league does them all the time. But there's a subtleness to them. And JJ is not subtle at all. He was knocking over people like a bull in a china shop. And the Eagles lucked out by having an officiating crew that was letting that go in a different week. That might not be the case. And obviously offensive pass interference is a big penalty that's going to kill a lot of drives. So I think just from the standpoint of lining up correctly, running routes correctly, and if you get any production, well, that's just the cherry on top of the sundae.
Well, and
they
you
just
can make
need Nelson out there to run the routes correctly, even if you want to run in a rub route.
You can make an argument too, John, that the Eagles were really aided by a couple of bad calls on the roughing the passer penalties. I thought were terrible.
Yeah, I agree. Those were, but that's the NFL. That's the modern NFL, and that's why I talked about the evolution of the game. I mean, that's part of it. They're going to make those calls if you go towards the if it looks bad more than anything else. And the one it looked, at least to the naked eye, they went low, but they really didn't. You kind of know, especially with a quarterback as high profile as Carson Wentz, you're going to get those flags. That's just the reality of the NFL. But to me, those rub routes, what I was talking about, that's like a baseball umpire, balls and strikes. It can vary dramatically from day to day in baseball. It can vary dramatically from week to week in football, depending on the crew you have. And I think the Eagles lucked out a little bit.
John, what's the status with Lane Johnson and how that will potentially impact, in your opinion, the Cowboys game?
Well, Lane's obviously one of the Eagles' best players. They need him out there. He's got a high ankle sprain. Typically, that's a multi-week injury, and you don't even think about being out there in the second week. Lane Johnson has played through one before. I expect him to play. I think everybody expects him to play. That's just who he is. And last Wednesday, I saw him. He was on a rollabout. You couldn't even put any weight on him at that point. Now, that's not necessarily – that's probably more of a precautionary thing in the fact that they wanted him to keep the weight off. They knew he wasn't going to play this past weekend, and they always had their eye on this game. But that's, nothing concrete, as we said. And Doug said yesterday he's definitely not going to practice Wednesday. I'd be surprised if he practiced Thursday. He might try to do something on Friday, just a little bit, but he's going to try to play. That's just who Lane Johnson is.
And, John, you talked about, you have an article up on 97.3 ESPN.com titled, "Can the Eagles Continue to Win with the Same Formula?" And first paragraph, you point out that, Coach Peterson confirmed 7 different personnel groupings that he used Sunday in the win against the Redskins. Is more of the same needed against Dallas? What do you expect?
Well, I don't know if you can continue to win this way. I mean, I just gave you the only wide receiver who caught a football against the Redskins was Greg Ward. The only other one that was targeted was JJ, who only got targeted twice in 71 plays. Rob Davis only played 16 snaps, didn't get targeted once. Boy, that's a tough way to win. And the Eagles had 4 drives of over 10 plays. Now, that's great, but that's the kind of thing that is tough to duplicate and tough to be consistent with and tough to do week after week after week. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, because let's say you have that different officiating crew and you do have that offensive pass interference. Well, that's the kind of thing. That's why it's so difficult to go 10-plus plays, because it might be a false start. It might be a holding call. It might be an OPI. Might just be a tackle for loss that's going to put you behind the sticks. So to expect to do that consistently and dump everything underneath, I think combined Miles Sanders and Boston Scott had 13 targets. All 13 were caught, which is great, but it's all underneath stuff. It's all screens. I joke the Eagles are going to set a record for running screen plays, and at some point one of these defensive coordinators is going to figure out, hey, they're going to run a screen 15 times a game. So this is an uptick, and we've been talking about it a long time. The Eagles the Redskins stink. The Giants stink. This was the one game left in the final month of the season where you have an opponent that has talent, and they haven't lived up to their talent, and it's fair to say that. But you look at the offensive side of the football specifically, and you see Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper and Randall Cobb and Michael Gallup. I mean, I don't know if you can beat that team Dinkin and Duncan unless they beat themselves, which is a possibility, but that's not what I want to lean on.
Right, and we've been asking a lot the entire season about identity. We love the identity question, and, Jason Kelce said he doesn't really like trying to pigeonhole, a team into a certain identity. He said if you look at most of the best offenses, they do a good job of keeping things diversified. Is the Eagles' crutch or identity right now the screen game? Like, how would you explain that, and what needs to be their identity Sunday?
Well, I think it is the screen game right now, and they've been very effective with it. But I don't know. The screen is not a staple of NFL offenses for a good reason, because it's designed to surprise people. And the more you run it, the less surprised they get. And especially you look forward and you say, well, in a lot of ways, the Cowboys are missing Leighton Vander Esch because of his athleticism. But you know what? For this particular game, Sean Lee is one of those linebackers that is going to sniff out the screen. And he's one of those heady guys who's going to understand what is unfolding in front of him. And Luke Kuechly type, who's going to call out the plays before you run them, that type of middle linebacker. So, I mean, I do think you have to diversify far more. And Doug admitted that, by the way, yesterday. He said we have to get more people involved. We can't rely on this because if you continue to do that week after week after week after week, and people look at those personnel formations and you say 7, but that's just dressing up things in a different way. I mean, Doug has admitted also that he's had to scale things back because of all the young players and all the practice squad players. So he's actually doing less. He's just trying to dress it up in different ways. So people look at 21, for instance, which is 2 running backs. And what do you think about when I say a 2 running back formation? What do you think about 2 guys in the backfield? Eagles never run 2 guys in the backfield. Boston Scott starts outside and motions somewhere else to the formation. Well, 2 weeks ago, that wasn't on film. Now it's all over the film. That's all the Eagles are doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe you can lean on and say this Cowboys team is poorly coached. I'm not going to necessarily disagree with that, but they got to be able to figure that out. So, I mean, the Eagles have to find a way to get these receivers involved, whoever's playing.
Yeah, and you wonder, what's the reason that they haven't been involved? Is that just the game plan, or because they're – I mean, I know the answer could easily be they're not very good, or is it something like, hey, the notion of we could scale things back because we're playing the Giants, we're playing the Redskins, we don't want to show a whole heck of a lot. I don't think that you could be that arrogant to go into a game like that when you're in the situation you're in, though, right?
Yeah, I agree with you there, Mike. I think a couple things. JJ, they were looking for him early, and he was just had a horrible game, and I think they stopped it because he wasn't playing well. And I think if they had other options, he probably would have gotten benched. That's how poorly he played in that game. Rob Davis essentially wasn't even in the game plan, so that was much ado about nothing when we talked about that all week. He ended up, as I said, playing, I think, 16 snaps. And they didn't even target him once. So he wasn't even involved in the game planning. So it was clear it was Sanders, it was Scott, it was Ertz, it was Goddard. And screen. And I don't know, and that's what I was talking about. Can you win with that formula consistently from week to week to week to week? The more you do it, the less likely you're going to be able to do it again.
What about Cooper? The Eagles have had problems with him. They've had problems with big play, number 1 receivers. We've all kind of touted about how good this guy is, and we don't give him enough credit. but he has not been the same player recently, including, the last couple of weeks here. It doesn't seem like he's been this big play kind of guy, although he's given the Eagles problems. But last week he had one catch for 19 yards in a game where they scored 30-plus points. He had no catches against New England a couple of weeks ago, 3 for 38 against Detroit. Now, he's had his fair share of some good games, but how do you see Cooper in this matchup?
Well, I think he's been playing through a quad injury, so you see that when the descent in production, it came when that happened, and he's been playing through it. And we saw what injuries can do at that position to players with Alshon Jeffrey trying to play through a calf and an ankle. But his presence on the field is still really, really important for that team. And if Schweimer was here, we'd give you Michael Gallup's numbers, and you see he's almost got 1,000 yards receiving, Michael Gallup, and he doesn't have a ton of catches. So he's been getting deep balls, and there's reason he's never seen double teams in his life, for obvious reasons. So he has an impact on the game. And he also put Randall Cobb in the slot as well. I mean, this team is loaded offensively at the playmaking positions, and it's it really is. You look at that group, and you talk about the coaching, and you talk about Jason Garrett. I don't know how you can be 7-7 with that team. There haven't been every team in this league has injuries, and they've had their share on the offensive line, but for the most part, all the playmakers have been out there, and they're all good. And it hasn't really transpired in enough wins from their standpoint. So I think there's more pressure on the Cowboys in this game because they should win it from a talent standpoint. But we all know, and it's early, I'm not going to predict the game, but I think it's going to go one of two ways. I think the Cowboys are going to just boat race the Eagles, or if it's a close game, I think the Cowboys are going to find a way to lose it because they always find a way to lose those types of games.
Yeah, and we know you've talked about this a lot, the difference, and you talked about it last night on the Countdown to Kickoff show, the difference between the Eagle defense on the road than at home, and I think that could be a big factor in this game.
There's no difference, I was told last night.
Well, you heard me. I had to get on the microphone during one of the commercial breaks and say, John, keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah. In what world is there no difference from playing at home and playing on the road in the NFL? I mean, it is hard to win on the NFL on the road. It's specifically hard in certain places. We all know Seattle for years and years and years, although it's changed a little bit this year. New Orleans, nobody wants to go to New Orleans ever to play in the Superdome. And Lincoln Financial Field is one of those places. Lambeau Field, obviously, is one of those places. Nobody wants to come to Philadelphia to play. And the numbers, and it's a significant sample size, now, the Doug Peterson, Jim Schwartz era, the numbers defensively at home versus the road are drastic. This is one of the best teams in the NFL on defense at home. It's in the bottom 10 on the road. You can argue to your heart's content it shouldn't be that way, but it is that way. And even this year, the Eagles got off to a slow start with those first two games. But ever since then, you look up, I think they're getting 18 points a game at home. That's it. And Seattle, New England, even the Giants, I mean, they weren't great against the Giants in the first half, but they shut them down in the second half with 29 total yards, only gave up 17 points. If you give up 17 points in the NFL, you should win every game.
Mm-hmm. John, what's going to be the difference? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and so home versus road has meant a lot to this team defensively.
Yeah, and that goes right into my question. What do you think is going to be the difference then Sunday at home against Dallas? Because you look at the box score, as Billy Schwein likes to do, and you look at the stats, and there's no sacks, there's no hits on the quarterback against Washington. Are you confident that will change? Obviously, that's rare, so it should change just regardless. But will it change for the better? Will it significantly improve against a better team?
Yeah, I mean, it will improve. I mean, Dak is a lot like Carson Wentz in the fact that he will hold on to the football, try to make. He'll give you more opportunities. Dwayne Haskins had been given those opportunities, but it's pretty clear the Redskins' game plan to get the football out of his hand quickly because of his limitations. Obviously, the Cowboys aren't going to do that. So, and then the second. And this is not just the Eagles. This is every team in the NFL, especially on the pass rush. There's a significant difference from home versus road simply because you have that extra tick off the ball, which you do not have on the road. So you get off a little bit quicker. So all that will improve. We'll see if the Eagles, one of the injuries we talked about, Jordan Howard, Nelson, Lane Johnson, Derek Barnett is the other one defensively, who hasn't been able to get out there with the ankle injury. We'll see if he's able to go this week. That would help. But, yeah, I expect the Eagles to have at least a couple sacks against Dak Prescott, but that's not even the issue. The issue is, as always, are you moving him off a spot? Are you hurrying him up? Are you making him before he wants to? That's the true test of a pass rush, but you can't wrap that up in a simple number, even though people think you can.
We got more Eagles-Cowboys coverage all this week. It's not really, well, for the Eagles anyway, it is not a maker. I mean, it's a make or break. If they lose, they are done. If they win, though, they still have more business to take care of. Dallas can, of course, control the game, win it, and then wrap up the division this Sunday. So will we have meaningful football after this Sunday? Well, tune in to find out. The countdown to kickoff and everything all happens Sunday, leading you into Merrill and Mike 425 Eagles-Cowboys on 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, we'll catch up tomorrow.
All right, thank you, guys.
And John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.